I know I'm a little late to the party, but we've got some new Draconic powers available as character options, so let's take a look at what my man Fizban has brought us. When tasked with building a character in the world of D&D, there comes several points where we are often faced with a tough choice, whether or not we should take an ability score improvement or a feat. More often than not, I find myself comparing abilities and boons granted from various feats to our possible +2 in stats, weighing in its importance to the build, flavor for our character's backstory, and overall strength compared to other feats. And I'm pleased to say that every option in Fizban's has offered compelling enough reasons to take them in a variety of scenarios. At least in my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments. But what's also important to take into account here is the fact that these feats are also put forward as potential boons for either slaying or befriending a dragon. I personally think that I'll be pretty likely to use something like this in the future as a DM, as I've been known already to reward certain feats to my players upon the completion of long stints of training or defeating a particularly key enemy. It could even be a cool way to power up your players if their quest patron is a dragon, or power up the big bad evil guy if he works at the behest of an evil great worm. There's lots to go on here, and plenty of ideas for creating compelling gameplay and storytelling rather than just looking at these options for future character builds. So I invite you to expand on the concept and really wow the rest of your group at your table. But enough of all that. What do these things actually do? Well, let's start at the beginning. Fizban's Treasury of Dragons gives us 3 new feats based on each type of dragon: Chromatic, Gem, and Metallic. And we'll begin with one of the community favorites. The gift of the Chromatic Dragon starts by offering us Chromatic Infusion. This ability states that as a bonus action, we can touch a simple or martial weapon to give it an extra 1d4 damage for a full minute. This extra damage comes online as acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage, and you might imagine that this directly relates to the source of this feat, via slaying a dragon or befriending a dragon of this type. However, this is not the case. We instead are able to select the damage we want upon each activation of the ability, becoming a really great option for just about any martial build, especially for rangers who might choose to use this on top of or instead of things like Hunter's Mark or Favored Foe, since this damage boost does not require concentration. And although we can only use this once per long rest, I'd say it's pretty great. Especially if your build is landing multiple attacks per round and you're playing in a campaign with only 1 or 2 combats between long rests. Do be aware, however, that this unfortunately is not going to work so great for monks, as unarmed strikes don't really work as simple or martial weapon attacks. But that's just the first half of this feat. We'll also gain an ability that allows us to use our reaction to gain resistance to an instance of acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage. Considering we can do this a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus per long rest, I'd say this is also pretty great. It's sort of like a less useful version of the Absorb Element spell, and while we may run out of uses at some point in earlier levels, we should be able to save ourselves from some massive attacks that would otherwise knock us down. Next up, we have the Gift of the Gem Dragon, which is our only half feat on the list. For those who aren't familiar with the term, this means that we'll get to add a +1 to a stat in addition to the extra boon that this feat offers. In this case, we can choose to add 1 to either Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma, bringing that stat to a maximum of 20. From there, the ability we'll gain is called Telekinetic Reprisal, which allows you to use your reaction after being hit by a creature within 10 feet to deal 2d8 force damage and push them 10 feet away from you. Although, if they make the strength saving throw associated with this ability, which is 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus the modifier for the stat you increased with this feat, they'll only take half as much damage and won't be pushed back. There are 2 important distinctions I'd like to make about this feat. Firstly, 2d8 force damage doesn't pack much of a punch in later levels, especially when your enemy makes the saving throw. The second distinction I'd like to make has to do with the telekinetic shove portion of this reaction. Although there is a saving throw for this, it could be a decent choice for casters that need a defensive option, specifically for clerics that aren't of the Tempest domain, as they already have something similar. Builds like this may often find themselves in the fray of melee combat without other options like shield or absorb elements, and Being that there is no size restriction for the push, you may even be able to interrupt the multi-attack of a rather intimidating creature, assuming they have no movement left. I won't really mince my words here in saying that this is probably my least favorite of the available feats from Fizban, even if we can use it a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus per long rest. But it definitely has its uses if you need to top off your intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. It could even be better than something like the Draconic Feat, depending on your build, since we can use it as a reaction. Last on our list, we have the Gift of the Metallic Dragon. This feat starts by granting us Draconic Healing, which gains us the Cure Wounds spell and allows us to cast it once per long rest without expending a spell slot, although you can still cast Cure Wounds with other spell slots that you have. Similar to the last feat, you'll choose Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma when you take this feat as your spellcasting ability. This first bit isn't exactly fantastic, but what we really want is Protective Wings, the second half of this feat. As a reaction, this feature will allow us to manifest a set of wings and add your proficiency bonus to your AC or the AC of another creature within 5 feet of you. You can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest, and you can only trigger it as you see an attack hit you or another creature within 5 feet. And so you might be tempted to compare this to the shield spell, and while the use case is similar, I'd say it's still not quite as good apples to apples, since it only protects from an instance of damage. But I do love that this scales along with your proficiency bonus, it can be used on your allies as well as yourself, and it doesn't cost a spell slot every time you use it. Oftentimes, I find I don't even need the +5 that shield offers, just a +2 or +3. Again, that's not me saying that this is better than shield, just different. I could see this being taken very effectively on non-casters that find themselves on the front lines often and hope to offer a bit of support to their allies, like perhaps a monk, a barbarian, or a fighter. After all, barbarians can't cast spells while in a rage, but they can use the Protective Wings ability. Though not exactly the best in the game, I'm really happy with these feats, especially as an option for rewarding my players from an interaction with a dragon. And if you're looking for inspiration as to what dragons would be perfect for this, you'll want to take a look at this video next, where I go over my absolute favorite dragons from Fizban's Treasury. That said, until next time, go out there and make some chaos.